go ahead and get started. I've got an agenda here for everyone. We are going to look at open enrollment and its aftermath. We're going to revisit that active enrollment. I've got a few things to add to my suggestion of running an active enrollment. Then we'll look at some more reporting, the EOI process, billing and discrepancies after open enrollment, salary changes, new hires during open enrollment, and we'll look into ACA just a little bit. I just want to give you some reminders on the ACA. So let's just get started with revisiting that active enrollment. I know that last time I made that recommendation, and I think I got some feedback from people that said, you know, I don't want anybody getting dropped. That's not a problem. What we would do, first of all, tracking your open enrollment engagement is going to be sort of top priority, and I'll show you what I mean by that. When you go into your reporting and you're looking at this open enrollment reports and the can't start, not started in process, what you're really looking for in the end is everybody who should be on benefits to be completed. So that can happen a number of ways. The employee, obviously, ideally will go in and complete their flow all the way through. Hopefully that's something I've made clear that should be messaged, where the employee starts at step one, goes all the way through the signature and gets that green check mark on everyone. That's your ideal best practice process, and that's gonna have your best results. Reminder, they can come back in, make some changes, as long as that open enrollment is still active, and then they just have to hit the signature one more time to enter those changes, if that makes sense. So that's one way to, and I'll help this season to try to keep our eyes on making sure everybody's done. Now there is this new report as well with declined enrollments. Now that is only those who actually go in and decline. So it doesn't really help us with the active enrollment situation. But I want to make a couple of things clear. Number one, HR can complete the enrollment for any employee who did not. You can go in and just say unresponsive management determined. And then if for some reason that employee comes to you and says, no, I meant to do that, we are 100% going to work with you. There, at no time are we going to say, well, they didn't sign up. As long as you're okay with it, we're going to work it out and try to make sure that that person gets what they want regardless. I'm going to send you a list of anybody who didn't complete and sign their enrollment, and then they're showing to drop coverage. Before we take anything to the carrier, I'm going to send you a list of people that says, okay, not if they actually went in and declined, but if they didn't go in and thusly the system thinks they're declining, I'm going to send you a list of those people and say, okay, they didn't make an election for this benefit. Do they really want to drop it? Before I take anything to the carriers. Keep in mind that I don't think any of you have enrollments that are integrated or connected with the carriers. So whatever you're doing here, we do have the opportunity to look at before we take it to the carriers. So know that that will be part of our process as well if you do choose to do that active enrollment. It is certainly your choice. It's only a recommendation, and I want to make sure that if you do choose passive enrollment, you at least understand the possible consequences. And of course, understand across all situations, the Olson Group, myself, the whole team is here to help you. We want you to have the best result. It's not about whether we go, because to be honest with you, an active enrollment is more work for us. So I'm not making recommendations that are based on mitigating workload. I'm making recommendations that I feel like will help to solve some of the problems we've seen in the past. So again, it's totally your choice. I just want to make sure you're aware of consequences either side. So that's really all I had to say about revisiting active enrollment. If there's any other questions about open enrollment, active, passive, however, please make sure you just let me know. I'm more than glad to talk through it and run you through whatever it is that I can offline. So let's jump into reporting. The things, some of the things I was not able to do last year, I don't know if you all know, but last year I sort of took this job about 3 weeks before open enrollment went into full swing. And so I was really learning on the fly that last year. So this year I think I have a much better grasp of what we're going to be dealing with. I think it'll be a much more successful season for me and hopefully therefore for everyone on the TOGCC system. So one of the things I'm going to do for everyone across the board is I'm going to pull a voluntary life report for every group before open enrollment starts. That way we have an easy to read document of what was before, and then we're going to have a report of what came. So if there's any of those discrepancies within the voluntary life, because I do know that that has been sort of a point of some difficulty in regard to making sure that enrollments are correct and EOIs are showing up as expected, et cetera. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that works. And then payroll deductions, I'm sort of vacillating as to whether I want to save it in the system. I may save reports for you guys, or I'm happy to help pull those reports, because you can pull payroll deduction reports before 1/1/20. You just have to use the correct date of 1/1/20. So I'm going to make that available to you. I'll either pull it for you when the time comes when open enrollment has completed, but it's not yet closed. And then I will save it within the system. And I will certainly let you know which of those things I'm going to do. If I save it in the system, you'll get a whole email with the whole thing. I just need to test through how well that's going to work. That's really it for after reporting, except for once open enrollment is done, as far as your window that you're giving your employees to enroll, we're going to want to run this open enrollment changes report. You'll notice when open enrollment is active, there's a find changes button. And if you just hit that a bunch of times over and over, you'll get any new changes. So once open enrollment closes and employees can't go in anymore, that find changes will remain as long as open enrollment is still open, but then you can pull reporting and you know that the employees can't go in and make changes anymore. So this is one good place to pull. I don't have an active open enrollment here, so I mean, I can show you the aftermath of their reporting. But you'll want to pull this one. And again, I'm going to try to help everybody do that. I may have to ask you to help remind me when you need it, because everybody needs it a little bit differently. Everybody's process is a little different. So I'm certainly happy to help with all of those reports throughout open enrollment this year. That's really the only other report, I think, that after open enrollment is very necessary, with the payroll deductions and then the EOIs. And we'll get into the EOIs here in just a second. If there's other reporting that you'd like to talk to me about that you think might be helpful in your process, again, every group has a different process. So those 3 reports are sort of standard that I would think pretty much anybody would want. But if there's other processes you have, feel free again to reach out to me. Let me know what those are and how I can help support your process for this open enrollment. I'm excited for this open enrollment season. I think it's going to be a whole lot improved over last year. I know we had some issues with some carriers, but we also had some issues with TOGCC last year. And, you know, all I can do is take that on myself and say that this year, I believe I've really put together a way that it's going to be a lot more successful. And I'm really excited to see how that can work. So keep in mind, again, I'm always available, always on board to sort of tweak your process versus mine, however I can. So let's get into the EOIs. I want to have a little bit of a conversation about the EOI process, because I think this has caused some confusion for some groups over the last few years of open enrollment. So EOI has its own timing. We know that the effective date of open enrollment is 1/1/20, but if someone elects over the guaranteed issue and they need to submit EOI, it's really going to depend on the timing of that employee, how quickly they get in the EOI, what kind of information. We have to keep in mind that it has to go through underwriting. After all information is received, you know, and given to the carrier, it still has to go through an underwriting process. So very often your voluntary life is going to have a 2 or a 3/1 effective date for the increased amount. So I'm bringing this up because it's been a question in regard to the EOIs, the payroll deductions, because your payroll deductions report is not going to show you the pending amount for, say, somebody, you know, elects $500,000 in voluntary life. The payroll deductions report is only going to report on whatever is approved. So the process of the EOI and going through this review insurability requests link as you get, and we have nobody outstanding in this particular group, but as you get those decision letters or emails or whatever communication it is you get from the carrier in regard to approvals, you want to make sure that as you get those, you're going into your review insurability request and updating whether they're approved or declined. Let me see if I can find, let me see if in another group I've got some EOIs outstanding. Let's see. I may or may not. Nope. I just wanted to, I know we went over this, status definitions, declined and rejected can be sort of conflated between the two. So just make sure if you're not sure, either reach out to me or you can read those definitions. But it is important to keep those up, because if you've got somebody pending that 500,000 and you're following, say, the benefit summary to try to do your payroll instead of the payroll deductions report, you're gonna think you need to deduct 500,000, the premium for 500,000 when it's not approved yet. And then you're gonna not be paying the right amount. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that for effective date. The carrier will give you the effective date. When you approve that EOI, you can give it the matching effective date. And that's really how we keep that payroll deductions report correct when it comes to voluntary life. If you have any additional questions on that, make sure you let me know. It's a process that we definitely try to help pay attention to, but we don't get those letters. We don't get those things. So on certain carriers, we can go in and we can find out. But, and we certainly are happy to help, but you know, as we all are, we're in Q4 and we're swimming through everything. So I think we want to try to all pay attention to those and try to make sure that those payroll deductions are staying on board. So the next little piece kind of has to do with that, and that would be billing after open enrollment. So I want to have a conversation with everybody about timing in open enrollment. Obviously, we're sort of at the mercy of the carriers when it comes to the renewals coming out, but I do want to point out that timing of open enrollment matters more when you're on TOGCC than when you're not. And here's why. It matters more because I think TOGCC has the wonderful benefit of being able to see all your benefits and see all your deductions and all of those things, but particularly at open enrollment time, timing makes them look like they're disparate, like they don't match. So I want to discuss that, billing timing. So if you think through it, it's going to depend on your OE dates. So if you're running your open enrollment well into December and you know you're not done until say December 15th, it's going to be approximately a week before we can get all of the enrollments to all of the carriers and make sure everything looks good and is correct. And we've done our checks with you guys and made sure everything is as we want it. So it's going to be, say, about a week for that. Excuse me. So now we're into the week of Christmas. And the carrier has however many groups all in open enrollment, and they're getting files from us that say, please process this. And it's December 22nd, for example. Well, that's going to take them a good 2 weeks or so, kind of depending on the carrier, to process through before it's going to be generated on a bill. So if you think about that, just as you're finishing your enrollment process and we're sending it to the carriers, that's when your January bill is being generated. So almost all the time that January bill is going to look incorrect. It's sort of something that should be expected, that January bill isn't going to look right. As we go through auditing and making sure as many enrollments are correct, or doing some corrections if there were, mistakes, and someone comes and says, I meant to elect this, can you help? And we go through all of those. Your February bill should look a lot better, but will still likely have some discrepancies with Navigator, because Navigator doesn't understand that. Navigator is a rules system. It doesn't understand, hey, the bill got generated here. It's just going to tell you what's true right now. And the bill may or may not. So ideally by March, everything reconciles. But I would expect going into this season that your January bill is going to be like what? And then your February bill is going to be a little less what, but still some what. And then hopefully your March bill reconciles. Kind of depends on, you know, situations that may or may not come up. But I do just wanted to point out that make sure ahead of time that I mention that because of timing, now if you finish your open enrollment toward the end of November, chances are your February bill is going to look pretty good. Your January bill still might be a little wonky, if that makes sense. I hope that makes some sense, and that leads me into the conversation about discrepancies. It's very similar, I feel. You know, this year my intent, I've put in some safeguards that I hope will avoid as much of it as possible. A lot of times discrepancies come when those employees don't finish that enrollment flow. I can't emphasize that enough. I think that's the key, or at least one of the keys for a successful open enrollment with as few discrepancies and as few questions as possible, is to get everybody to really go through that whole flow. And by the whole flow, I mean making sure that they're looking at their, let me go back to this other group I had. Making sure they're looking at every piece of this enrollment flow. So let me go in to, oops, that was the wrong thing. There I am. I just want to point out what I'm talking about. I don't have an open enrollment window, but it looks exactly the same. What I'm talking about is personal information all the way through their signature, which in an open window will be right down here. So each of these should have that green check mark. So the orange line should turn into a green check mark. So if I hit save and continue, I get that green check mark. So each of these, a lot of people tend to, especially if there's information already here, they'll skip it and they'll click on these. And you can do that, but this is where you get into, oh, I'm not finished. And then they get to the signature page, they can't finish, and we know that they're probably not going to go back into here and try to figure it out. So then they just don't sign it. And then while the enrollments may feed over correctly, they also may not, because this is, you know, this is built in for a reason with that signature, with tasks, etc. So I just want to keep driving that in. Like if you can message to your employees to make sure to go through that whole flow, I think we're going to have a lot easier experience this year. Do keep in mind that in Q4, all of the carriers are overwhelmed, they're understaffed, they have delays, they have errors. We are going to work with them. We're going to work through those as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But do keep in mind, again, with billing and discrepancies, that it may take some time, depending on the carrier, depending on the situation, to get those looking right. We will stay in touch with you and keep you updated as much as possible. Always feel free to reach out and ask for an update if we haven't been successful in updating you enough, which obviously we all want to do that, but I think we all understand what Q4 looks like. So I'm going through this stuff really, really fast. I know I am obviously going to follow all of this up with my usual follow-ups. I think this stuff is sort of a given, but at the same time not a given, because I think in particular TOGCC points out these things more than if you're not on a platform. So I have 3 more buckets to discuss. One of them is salary changes. Last year I had no idea what to tell you about salary changes, so I think we did some of them after, some of them before. This year I know that ideally we will do them before. I've run the test. If we put in the salary changes and we make them effective 1/1/20, then your open enrollment window will reflect the benefit that's based on that salary for any salary-based benefit, for an LTD, a short-term, and a voluntary life if that's, you know, if you're not a flat amount, if you're a time salary. If we go ahead and put in those salaries ahead of open enrollment with their forward effective date, or if it's effective sooner, fine. But I can enter them for 1/1/20 and then your benefits will reflect the correct numbers. So I wanted to bring that up and let you know that I will also be sending to everyone a salary changes template. Their template has changed a bit this year. They've improved the import process. So I'll send those to everybody. You just send them back to me and I'll handle the import of your new salaries. So you should look for that. I might send it with a follow-up today, actually. And that way you have it on hand and you can just fill it out at your earliest convenience and then get that back to me. And if you have any questions on how to fill it out or what should be filled and what shouldn't, again, just feel free to let me know. I'll send it with a little bit of instruction. So sort of the last big piece I have to talk about is new hires during open enrollment. Those have sort of caused a bit of back and forth, I think, over the last couple of years. And I've really spent some time understanding what's going on. And the deal is when you hire somebody in your open enrollment time, they're going to have to go through their new hire window, as anybody does. And the difference for somebody in open enrollment, or that's a new hire during open enrollment, is they also have to go through the open enrollment window, even if the effective date is the same. Because what the system can't do is separate that completely, meaning it can't understand if a new hire is effective 1/1/20 on a new hire window, that they're also effective 1/1/20 in their open enrollment. In most cases, it's not going to change, you know, they're not going to choose a different benefit, but they do have to go through both windows when they're a new hire during open enrollment. In the case that they have differing effective dates, say for example, someone's hired 10/1, you start your open enrollment 11/10, they still haven't gone in and done their benefits, but their effective date for their benefits is 12/1 as a new hire, but it's 1/1 for open enrollment. That's really why they have to go through both. So I get it, when it's the same effective date, it's kind of annoying, it feels kind of redundant, but the system is actually bucketed out and it's not gonna understand if they only go through their new hire that they also made some open enrollment elections. And that's just one of those things that causes the system to go, I don't know what to do with this. Here's something that I think might be right, and that's where we get some discrepancies and issues. So I wanted to make sure to keep you aware of that. It's a good way to keep a pulse on who's a new hire in open enrollment is in that reporting. It's easy. This is just a quick pull report. So say you start your open enrollment, I don't know, October 30th, let's just pretend. And you're gonna hit generate. Now, right now there aren't any, but while you're in November and you've got hires and you've got open enrollment going on and everything's all over the place, you can come in here and just say, okay, who have I hired since I started open enrollment? And just take a quick look, make sure that everybody who's been hired has also gone through their flows. The other good way to check that is here in the new hire enrollment status and or the open enrollment status. So if you know you have a new hire, you're gonna click on this guy. I've got 4 new hires that haven't started. Who are they? Okay. And then I can look at those people and say, do they, you know, were they hired during this period? Do they also need to go through their open enrollment? I can look at the open enrollment. Who's not started? Are they the same? There's a few ways to sort of track that. That's another thing that I will try to keep my finger on the pulse of and try to help make sure that all of those things are being addressed. I just want to make sure to bring it to your attention as well so that hopefully we can help each other throughout this season. So sort of lastly, and then I'll open it up for any questions or any suggestions or anything you guys have that you want to talk about, is ACA. So for 1095s, for those of you who are beholden to having to do the 1094, 1085s, I don't know who of you on the call or who of you are on the list of us processing it, but I just wanted to make sure that you're importing your hours monthly. If you're not monthly, I know I've looked and some of you, have done it through July or something like that. So I would just say before 1095, we start processing 1095s, those should be updated and all hours uploaded. And then the second piece is to make sure that your employees are correctly marked as in their ACA. So what I'm talking about when you go into any employee is this ACA tab in their profile and the classification. Excuse me. As a reminder, eligible, this regularly works more than 30 hours a week, is governmental sort of. It's the standard threshold. But if your benefit threshold is lower than 30 hours, you want to gauge this eligibility on, are they eligible for your medical plan? So if somebody down to 24 hours is eligible, you're going to mark them as eligible regardless of that 30 hours. So keep in mind, once again, as a reminder, the eligibility threshold is what your threshold is. This regularly works in parentheses is just the system telling you what's standard. Ineligible is obviously the opposite of that. If they're clearly ineligible for your benefits, if you go down to 18 hours and they work 15, they're going to be ineligible. If they work 19, they're going to be eligible. Variable hour are those people that work PRN, work sometimes 50-hour weeks, work sometimes 5-hour weeks, and you're tracking them to see if they're eligible. And that's all going on here in your Manage Employees and Manage Calculator. If the system, if their profile that we were just in isn't marked correctly, the system does not know to gauge that, to track that. So one way you can make sure of this is to pull a row-based report. I would just do first name, last name. And let's see, you'd want to pick any department division that you need to be aware of. I'm just looking at this now. There we go. ACA classification. That's all I would personally pull. I would literally just look at it this way. And then you can say, and you can put hours worked, whatever it is you need for your process to know whether or not they should be eligible, and just kind of take a quick look. Are these correct? Is this person, should this person be eligible? Is this not eligible? You can gauge this against your ACA tracking here if you want to. And again, this is something that I probably will leave for you guys to handle as far as the ACA eligibility. But if there's any questions, you need help pulling the report, you want me to send you a report, I'm happy to do that. If you find that a great many of your people are not looking correct, then at that time, reach out to me and I will create an import so you don't have to go into each individual. That's where I can be most helpful if you find that you have a lot of people that aren't marked as you believe they should be. So keep in mind that if it's a handful of 4 or 5 people, just make the change in their profile. If it's a bunch of people, let me know. I'll send you a template. We'll get that imported for you so you don't have to go through all of those changes. Same thing for salary. That's what I'm doing and sending you that template. If there's anything else you can think of, if you would like to see all of your employees' names changed to capital, all caps, if you'd like to see them all changed to proper case, we can do all of that with an import. So if there's anything you want to see changed before open enrollment gets going, please let me know. I'm actually going to be visiting a lot of the open enrollments this year. I'll be out for some benefit fairs, some open enrollment meetings themselves. So I'll be around. If I'm not going to be at your group, obviously let me know how I can best support you that day. There's a couple of groups happening on the same day, so I'm sort of having to pick, but if you have any particular desire about whether you'd like me to be at your group or not, please let me know. Other than that, I think I'm going to send a pretty long follow-up on this one. It went quickly because we didn't have a lot to dig into in the system. I have most of these things I'm hoping to sort of handle with you / for you. So any questions you have that stem from this webinar, please feel free to reach out. I am again going to follow up with a fairly detailed follow-up. There aren't a lot of screenshots. We didn't do a lot within the system, but I think it's been a lot of good information. So I'm going to follow this up with whatever I can as far as information in detail. I'm also going to go ahead and send that salary template that you can send to me at any time. And I'm going to send out that Survey Monkey that I always do. That way I feel like you can give me feedback anonymously. If you feel comfortable giving it to me directly, I'm perfectly comfortable receiving it directly. So I'm always open for feedback. Next year we will do this again. This is going to be the last webinar for the year. We will start back up. I'm not sure if it will be January or February. It strikes me that we might want to wait until February. But I think next year we'll get into some more specifics on tasks, some ways that we can set up the system to just be a little bit more detailed and have more information, have videos, have, you know, I think in a lot of cases we're not really digging into what the system can do for us. So next year is yet another year of big growth, I feel like, on TOGCC. This year I'm really excited for Q4. If there's anything I can do to answer questions, make sure you reach out to me directly, and I am here for you all season. So I want to make sure you all know that, and I will go ahead and let you get back to your days, and I will shoot over these follow-ups. And